I'm good. I've done this before.
One of the first calls that I got was from Axis saying, hey, do you want to direct for us? Yes, please.
That's insane.
A lot of people miss out on is it was a commercial for Big, Medium, Small.
An incredible commercial for that pack.
With Unreal Engine and with Irradiation, that's when things really opened up. It feels like it's the biggest thing to happen to animation, and this changes the workflow completely, and it's faster.
Is there any projects that you're currently working on?
There is an opportunity where I actually can start thinking about a feature length. It's gonna be a bit of a ride though.
Hey Sava.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me. I'm always happy to rant about how awesome Unreal is. So yeah, my name is Sava Zivkovic. It's one of those very hard to pronounce Eastern European last names. My first name is a little bit more forgiving. I'm a director. I'm based in Belgrade in Serbia. I studied architecture and interior design, and that's where I kind of got into 3D. From there, I've sort of transitioned more into 3D visualization, started making fully animated CG short films, and then one by one they kind of grew a little bit, and eventually I got to direct one of my first short films, which got me to Axis Studios, working as a freelance director for the past 5 or 6 years at this point, working mostly on game cinematics. You know, because of that kind of CG generalist background that I have, I like to run my little independent production with a group of friends that I've grown over the years. That's where I still kind of try and do as many of my own personal films as I possibly can within the time that I have. That has changed drastically with the introduction of Unreal, which we're probably going to talk a lot about today. I think I got a bit of a lucky break with my first short film, which was it was kind of this title sequence for a conference, but it was made as a fully animated short film.
Which one was that one?
So it's called IFCC 2017, and that's what actually got me, you know, into the director's chair. Like, that's the first time. I've made some shorts before that, but I never had, you know, the balls to call myself a director. That was the first time where I actually felt like, all right, I've earned the title on that project. And literally, like, the one of the first calls that I got was from Axis saying, hey, do you want to direct for us? And I was like,
that's insane.
Yes, please.
Is that something that you wanted to actually, like, in the back of your mind, I'd love to direct? Or did
you
just
I mean, absolutely. But it was never, like, I didn't make IFCC in order to get a job like that. I made it because it was really fun, and I wanted to make it, and it was an amazing kind of collaborative experience with my friends, and we all loved working on it. That's why I say it was a lucky break, because it just kind of, it happened naturally. It wasn't something I was pursuing, and I honestly like preferred that way, because for that first one, the aspect of us like really having fun and not really having any expectations out of it,
man.
Actually helped us a lot. At the time, we were utilizing Octane, and that allowed me to, especially doing it on your own, and rendering back in the day was a huge thing. You know, it allowed me to not worry about rendering time and just kind of focus on the story aspects, and that was great. That was very liberating. But also, I had a very lucky situation as well, where I had access to the professional motion capture stage here in Serbia. So a group of friends who own it and run it, they wanted to kind of co-produce the film with me, so they kind of lent me their services, which is not something you'd have on your, you know, every day. So that's what really helped kind of elevate the work a little bit, especially in that moment where you didn't even have like low-cost solutions like Rococo or Xsense suits or anything like that. Like it was either, you know, a mocap studio or nothing.
Coming from ArcViz into writing these short stories, have you got experience prior to that? Is it something you enjoy doing?
I don't have any experience prior to this with that. I've kind of learned that along the way as well. For the first kind of early couple of years of my work at Axis, you know, I knew kind of what my strengths were and what my weaknesses are, and writing is definitely not one of my strengths. For the longest time, I just thought of myself as, all right, you know, I really enjoy directing, but I'm going to focus only on directing and only, you know, I'm not going to dive too deep into writing. Roughly around 2018 or something like that, we had a shoot in London, in Pinewood, for one of the Axis projects. At the same time we were there was a Robert McKee workshop. If you're familiar with Robert McKee, he's a fantastic writer, story doctor. That was absolutely mind-blowing and eye-opening, and that's where I got hooked to story, like not specifically writing per se, but just the art of story. And I've been kind of diving deeper and deeper into it, and through all of the pitches that I've done through Access, I've written more and more scripts for the pitches themselves. So that's something I used to kind of shy away from, but I actually started doing. And there's a lot of experience that went in there because like in my 5 or 6 years at Access, I've directed like around 10 cinematics / trailers at the moment. But I must have pitched on like, I don't know, like 50, 60, something like that. Most of my CG and filmmaking experience, it all kind of was learned through the process of doing it.
The best way, isn't it, at times, to just go in there and learn,
Yeah, you write something shitty and then, you write a few more, and then over time it becomes a little bit less shitty. So, that's kind of how it works out.
What's your approach to your concept ideas? How does it come about when you're starting a project?
Concept art term specifically, I worked with a very close friend of mine, Milan Nikolic, who is a fantastic concept artist. Back when we were freelancing, we used to share this kind of co-working space, but we were all freelancing and everyone was doing their own thing. But, like sitting next to him all day and seeing the stuff that he drew, it was like, oh, we got to make something together. And he was also, like, oh, he's drawing all of this, but hey, would it be awesome to see this actually move,
Nice. That's a great ecosystem, isn't it? Straight away, like having the people next to you and in the same room doing different things.
It's fantastic, especially like that was like in the early days of, with the freelancing career, like straight out of college, basically.
When you see these concept arts, does it then spark more things and then you can develop and roll with that?
Absolutely, yeah.
But that's really nice, a natural way to sort of explore and evolve.
That's kind of how Irradiation started. Milan didn't specifically work on that. That started with Jama. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
Yeah.
He's one of the greats. The first idea for Irradiation was, hey, let's just make a trailer for the pack, just to sell the pack. It started as a 1-minute thing, like just a 1-minute trailer, just a couple of cool shots, and that's it. So then, like, he sent me the entire pack, and I just started playing with it in Unreal. Just by putting it inside Unreal and slapping a bunch of fog on it and just kind of walking with the camera around, immediately, hit me with all these ideas for what the story can be. And then it was like, all right, let's do it, but I don't want to make it the 1-minute thing. I want to make a full short film, basically. So that's kind of how it happened. But yeah, I think that's like to your previous kind of question. I think that's a big aspect of it, just being inspired by art.
When you start laying out these stories, work with the concept artist, spark ideas, especially for Irradiation, and that really drives that story or starts to. Do you plan out with storyboards and previews? And what about the planning of these shorts?
So previs is something I was very, very close to. Like previs is something I used to do a lot on my own. I still do it for specific things. I was always kind of missing out in the previous stages, the aspect of lighting. For me, like cinematography is one of my favorite aspects of production. And in 3D or CG production, lighting comes at the end. But that's such an unfair way to work.
Yeah.
In live action, it's just there. You point the camera, and lighting is such a crucial part of cinematography that I felt for the longest time that we're missing out big time in CG because we don't have that aspect. And then Blender came out with 2.8 with Eevee, and that completely like blew my mind because it had viewport render that was looking really nice, similar to Unreal. Like you had depth of field, you had PBR shading, you had, volume fogs and nice shadows and all of that. So that kind of fixed my kind of need for that aspect. But it was still, the one thing I was missing still was there's none of that kind of explorative process, which again you have with live action. But in animation, like that rarely ever happens. Like it's very, very pre-planned, make the previs, this is what we're making. It's there for a reason because animation is expensive as hell. So you kind of need to plan everything ahead. So that's where Unreal really kind of, blew my mind. The whole kind of story of Irradiation is kind of that aspect of it, which I enjoyed by far the most. Like that was by far the best experience I've ever had, just being able to work in animation, but shoot it like live action and be very flexible with how I'm going to shoot, be very, opportunistic and find things that I wasn't planning on, just kind of walk around and see something. So that's that kind of like super, super fun process of filmmaking that was, I don't think it was available before in animation. I think you can argue you could do that in like typical, like Maya workflows, but it's not the same as it is in Unreal because again, you're working with full lighting information and shading information, and it's completely real time. So that's kind of the closest I ever got to like a full on proper live action experience. And it was absolutely fantastic. It feels like it's the biggest thing to happen to animation industry. Is just changes the workflow completely. I didn't have any previous for that. Like that's the same process. It would defeat the purpose of using it. So all I did was I had a shot list, just an initial outline. This is the shots. For the most part, I've stuck to that shot list, but I would say like maybe like 80%. And then like the 20% that was added later was just the stuff that I would never think of if I haven't had an opportunity to see that. Those 20% I would say were probably the most creative things of the whole thing as well.
It just goes to show then, doesn't it, that you can't get that unless you're in there.
No, yeah. And not necessarily that you can't, like you can probably spend a lot of time in pre-production and like really test things out and play things out, but this is just way more fun. And it's faster as well.
I've got a question about the decision for the shape of the entity in Irradiation. I'm trying to link the Blender Cube inspiration there. Maybe it's a completely not.
It's not, although people have made that joke, like this is where all the Blender Cubes go when you delete them.
No, okay, no.
There were a few comments like that.
Really?
It wasn't that. All the cubes are basically because it was the backstory of Irradiation was that it's. Are you familiar with the Chernobyl graveyard? It's like where they discarded all the vehicles that were irradiated. So this was like an alternate version of that, but it's not in a giant field. It's like in the forest. So that's where all the radiation material was discarded. It's sort of Chernobyl meets Stranger Things. The being, the anomaly, is like a link between two dimensions. And the way it manifests itself is it manifests itself through the irradiated material back on Earth. And the most irradiated material out of everything that's been discarded are the RBMK graphite blocks. So those blocks are the actual tops of the reactor. Like I don't know if you saw Chernobyl, but if you look for how the reactor looks, like those blocks are literally at the top of the control rods. And when the reactor blew up, those graphite blocks were like scattered all the way around. They literally say it in the show, there's graphite on the rooftops. And those are like massively, massively radioactive. They're still lying around all over the place. I think so.
Can you just talk about your workflow with, motion capture, a 3D application and Unreal Engine and sort of sending things back and forth?
That all goes through Take One, the motion capture company I've mentioned a couple of times. Like for Irradiation, the whole production was based around the prefabs and pre-made assets. The main purpose of it still, which I think a lot of people miss out on, is it was a commercial for Big, Medium, Small. It says so in the very end credits. But
an incredible commercial for that pack.
So yeah, in terms of like all of the assets for the film, like all of the Big, Medium, Small assets were obviously provided. They were already, fully shaded, rigged, everything. The environment was also like purchased off of a store. It's called like MAWI, Mavi environments. They're fantastic. Then when it comes to motion capture, we shot everything. You get, what's called a live solve, which is kind of like a first pass, real-time, mocap solve that you get on the day, basically.
So that's raw. That's just straight up. You just receive the raw.
That's raw.
Yeah.
But it's good enough that it gives you something to work with. It gives you, you can bring all of those in the editor and you can start working and you can start creating your edit. And then once you have your edit, then you can say, these are the parts that I'm actually using. And then they actually solve it. Because basically solving is done per second and keyframe animation is also done per second. So, the more seconds you have, the, more it's going to cost. And then literally everything I get at the end is just a FBX file that's animated, and I can just drop it in Unreal, and it just works.
Did you go there to the mocap studio to direct actors as well?
Absolutely, yeah. That's a big part of the whole process. Really, you absolutely have to be there on the stage to really drive everything.
And what about lighting? What is it? You yourself that's sort of in there, cinematography, lighting, experimenting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Any tips and tricks to get the Sava look?
Just slap a bunch of fog. when in doubt, add more fog. That's
That's a good mantra.
the number one rule. Yeah. No, it's I mean, yeah, the fog kind of came from, limitations back in the day, but it kind of became the aesthetic choice a little bit over the years. What I try to do with both cameras and lights is I try to ground them as much as possible. So even like when shooting like irradiation, for the most part, I'm not doing any massively difficult camera moves that will require crazy equipment. I'm trying to think of it, if I'm there on a live action set and I only have like a handheld rig and a tripod, like that's all I'm gonna do.
My background's previs and shot creation and storytelling. So one of the big rules for me is, how would you shoot that? You see cameras flying all over the place, and then you think, well, where is the camera? What's it doing? What's the intention of that?
Yep.
If it's a pull, a creep, is it on an angle? There's a reason for every decision like that.
Yeah, that stuff always in my mind tends to pull me out of a film. Where whenever something massive like that happens, that feels unmotivated, or where the camera's coming from, it just pulls me right out.
When I'm watching a movie with my wife, I'll be saying like, why have they done that? Or how's they done that? That looks weird. Like, where would that camera be actually? And she's like, will you just shut up and watch the movie?
Yeah.
But it's just something that, I can't help. So you work freelance as a director with Axis. You love working on things like irradiation and that kind of process. What's it like going into those larger studios and working in that type of workflow?
It pretty much still is very much previous storyboards type of, standard kind of workflows. And again, like I completely understand that because it's just the nature of the productions we're in.
What's it like working with a team of people that know that you've done such short films? And are you still hands-on with these, or is it tempting to like, just give it me, I just want to do this? Because
no, it's actually not. I think it was like that at the start. I kind of had an idea of what directing is, but like that's kind of where I actually learned what it is. That it's more got to do with, managing the team and conveying your ideas, not necessarily executing them yourselves, because frankly, it's impossible in the time frames. One of the first experiences was coming from doing most of the things myself, coming into a 50, 60 people team. We have the storyboard artists do the amazing storyboards, and then the editing department would edit them. Then the previs and layout will do their thing. People, make all the models, they render everything out, do the effects, and then we're all sitting in a review, and everyone says, "Oh, great job, Sava," and I'm like, I didn't do shit, like it's that was a very kind of revealing moment for me where I kind of felt like I didn't do anything there. If possible, like I still do my own previs, like from time to time if I have the time for it. I still enjoy that process a lot because that's kind of, it allows me to have my hands on it for a little while, but it allows me to be, fast and iterative and try different things out.
What inspires you outside of, movies, games, directors, cinematographers?
Yeah, games was a big part of my kind of growing up. I rarely get to play them these days. It's one of those interesting things, like as soon as I started working on them, I stopped playing for some reason. Music used to be a huge part of my kind of inspiration, really. Like that's where I drew a lot from in kind of the early days. It's universal for everyone, right? Like you hear a track and then immediately like you start imagining like a music video version of this track, what's the music video to this song that you're, hearing now. And it's such a cheat, it's such a, it almost like it's a cheat code, it gives you like visuals for free. Early days when we were kind of sharing that co-working space, like we used to just nerd out and just play tracks and just kind of trip out and, talk about, this could happen here and this could happen there. And none of those things we talked about ever got made. But it was a really fun way to kind of, come up with ideas and just kind of be passionate about expressing ideas. Getting back into that a little bit and finding more and more inspiration in that has been fantastic. Yeah.
So is there any personal projects that you're currently working on or would like to, or do you like to just switch off after a day and then?
I would like to switch off. I don't know how, to be honest.
Same.
It's very problematic. I've been learning that in the past few years, just kind of trying to, find a little bit of a work-life balance, which is really, really hard. Beckoning is something that I'm focused on right now with developing it. We're actually in pre-production right now, just outlining everything, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be able to push on into production soon enough. It was always this problem of, you come up with a story, you come up with a setting, with a world, and then, because animation is so damn expensive, we can only do a short. And that really changed with Unreal Engine and with Irradiation. That's when things really opened up, and when I realized there is an opportunity where I actually can start thinking about a feature length with the small team, not talking about big studios and productions, like keeping a very small and independent production like I have been doing for my shorts. I want to say that I'm done with shorts. I've always wanted to make feature length films and longer format films. Slowly getting closer to that. So that's kind of what I'm devoting most of my time now. It's going to be a bit of a ride though. It's not going to be a couple of months project. It's going to be a couple of years.
You mentioned that you're not great at the work-life balance and detaching from those, days, and you've got to be doing something right, or are you just an absolute machine, Sava?
In terms of kind of detaching, I mean, I kind of, that's something I probably started doing last year, is just kind of trying to detach a little bit more and not really, take the work with me. The same thing you described with your wife, it's kind of the same problem. We would watch something and I wouldn't be able to stop, talking about the techniques behind it. And it's just like, can we just watch the damn movie? Picking up hobbies that don't really have anything to do with this really help, or it helped me at least. That's why I kind of find it hard to talk about it, is because it's, so different for everyone. Record collecting is something that's analog, something that you can just spend the time with a little bit. Reading, although I am reading books on filmmaking, which doesn't really help a lot, but it does, kind of move me away from the screen a little bit. Cooking, anything that can kind of, remove you from this world, I do think it helps. But again, it just depends on which part of your life you're in and what situation you're in. I wouldn't be giving this advice a couple of years ago. I'd probably be saying, you need to put every ounce and every minute of your life into this, so it just depends. Yeah,
I know what you mean. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Definitely does depend. Like you say, everybody's different. Some things work for some people and differently for others. So you mentioned fog in your shots, when in doubt, add more fog. Do you have any top moments in cinema with the foggiest shots? I've got one here at the minute. Ryan Gosling in Blade Runner.
Yeah, the Blade Runner one is pretty iconic. I would say Dune as well has the Bene Gesserit scene when you don't really see the ships at all. You just see literally like the points of light where they're emitting from the ships. I think that's super, super effective way. Arrival as well, but I don't want to show my love for Denis Villeneuve too much here by naming three of his films. Yeah,
movies that you've picked are very...
Yeah, I think those are the ones that come to mind immediately, which definitely says something.
No, thank you. That's great. We'd like to just wrap up on advice for filmmakers diving into Unreal Engine for maybe the first time, or any advice for people looking to get into real-time filmmaking.
There's probably two things. There's one is like a specific advice, what I touched on already, is if you are coming from a different 3D software, a different package. I think like everyone I've ever talked to who switched to Unreal had a really hard time switching to it. I think it's almost, in a way, it's like easier if you don't have any previous 3D experience, if you just dive straight in, because then you're not, biased towards what you were using before. That learning curve is pretty intense, but once you're over it, it becomes super, super intuitive. The other point, like I think there's a slight misconception, when people see Irradiation, and because of, how well it did online and stuff like that, they think, I know Unreal and I know everything about it. Where in fact, I know very little of Unreal. I know like very, very basic things. If you know how to animate cameras in any software, you know how to animate them in Unreal, and the same thing with lighting. If you know what makes, for a good composition in terms of camera framing and lighting, then you can replicate that pretty much in any software. So it's not really an Unreal specific question. I think a lot of people mistake that for being like, oh, there's Unreal specific tutorials or lessons for that. It's more about, the actual kind of filmmaking process. I would much rather, spend the time on kind of analyzing cinema in general and learning about lighting and learning about cinematography, more so than learning about the nitty-gritty, technical stuff in Unreal. That's the stuff that's going to make you a better filmmaker, not, understanding where every button in Unreal is.
Does that sort of same work ethic apply for somebody that wants to start making short films in general, is just jump into it when people have got ideas and thoughts and they're kind of fearful of, how do I start?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, that's pretty much, what I did. I mean, there's really no other way if you think about it. Like, you just kind of have to. I think what worked well for me is the kind of very slow evolution of that. So it started with, very kind of simple motion design pieces, motion graphics, stuff like that. That was, a couple of shots of something, a logo reveal or something. But it taught me, how to time and edit specific things. And then one of the first couple of shorts that I've done, because I didn't have access to animation and characters and anything like that, but I was still kind of halfway into ArcViz. They were all focused on architecture. And architecture is, by the way, it's a fantastic subject matter to learn composition on, especially if you choose your architecture subject, wisely. The way I started was, it was all sci-fi stuff. So it was characters with no face. So I don't have to worry about face animation.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then, slowly we got into animation and facial animation, but it was a weird alien. So that's different than a human. So you can get away with a lot of things there. But then we got to radiation. There was like all the people were masked. So we don't really have to worry about the bottom parts of the face. It's just the top, bit by bit. And then by the time we got to beckoning, like that's where, things developed fully, that I was comfortable both with writing dialogue, facial performances, facial animation capture, and all of that stuff. Out of all the rambling that I've just done, that's probably a good piece of advice to kind of get is start with something that's very simple and that's very straightforward and like a very short film. It doesn't have to be a 10-minute piece. It could literally be a minute. It doesn't have to be complex at all. It doesn't have to have characters. You do something super complex as your first one, there's a good chance you're never going to finish it. And then you're going to be stuck in this perpetual hell of, I'm feeling down, I'm never going to finish this and whatnot. Whereas if you do something really simple, but you finish it, that immediately gives you the boost of trying something new.
Thanks, Sava. That's great. Architecture, you mentioned interesting subjects and choosing your architecture wisely for composition. I saw a challenge on the internet with the Blender Cube. So that's their kind of main focus. It'd be interesting to see what would Sava do with telling a short story about a simple cube. You kind of already included it in a project.
I mean, yeah, I was gonna say it's probably irradiation.
Yeah. Well, imagine the cube can't even move. It's
probably something like that. Or it might be something like Everything Everywhere All at Once, where it's just like the two cubes talking and the two pieces of stone talking to each other. A funny story with that was when I first saw the film in theaters, that scene when it came up with the two rocks talking, we didn't have any subtitles because like that's how it was actually like done. Like you had that, they were having a conversation. But we didn't have any subtitles. It was just like reverse shot of two rocks and then a wide shot. And it was that for like 5 minutes. And nobody like knew what the hell was going on. It was just like the scene that was going on for so long with no subtitles, but it was clearly shot as like, all right, these two rocks are talking. So we definitely got that. But we didn't get, what they were talking about. So that was funny.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you this afternoon. And we really appreciate your time. It's been amazing. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you for the invite. I enjoyed it. Hopefully your audience finds the conversation useful.
They will. Absolutely, man. So thank you. I just want to say all the best and we'll catch up soon, man.
All right. Cheers. Thanks so much.